My name is Amanda, and this is the story of how my life turned upside down, not just once, but twice. To understand it all, I have to start at the beginning. I was born into a warm and loving family. My parents, Daniel and Emily Morgan, made life in our small suburban town feel like a dream. Dad was a journalist, and Mom worked as a nurse. We weren't wealthy, but happiness filled our cozy home. Everything changed when I turned 12. It was a rainy Tuesday evening. My parents had gone to a dinner party, leaving me at home with my grandma. We were watching some silly cartoon when the phone rang. Grandma's muffled sobs from the kitchen gave me a chill I'll never forget. The days that followed blurred together. Mom died instantly in the crash. A drunk driver had plowed into their car. Dad survived, but his legs were crushed. When I finally saw him in the hospital, he was barely recognizable. He looked fragile, a shell of the lively man I once knew. "Amanda," he croaked, reaching for my hand. "I'm so sorry, sweetie. I'm so sorry." I didn't understand why he was apologizing. It wasn't his fault. As I grew older, I realized he wasn't apologizing for the crash itself, but for what our lives would become, the struggles we would face, the mother we'd lost, and the father he believed he could no longer be. After the accident, life felt like a puzzle missing too many pieces. Dad eventually came home from the hospital, but he wasn't the same. His legs didn't work anymore, and the man who used to chase me around the yard now spent his days in a wheelchair. For a while, he seemed like he might give up completely. I'd catch him staring out the window, lost in thought, his hands resting on the wheels of his chair. But Dad was stronger than he gave himself credit for. Once he settled into his new routine, he dove headfirst into his work. He was a brilliant writer, and even though he couldn't chase leads anymore, he poured his energy into being an editor for the city's major newspaper. Watching him find his purpose again gave me hope, even as my own heart ached for Mom. By the time I hit my teens, Dad had become my rock. He made sure I had everything I needed, from school supplies to birthday parties. He pushed me to join clubs, make friends, and live as normal a life as possible. But truthfully, I didn't want normal. I wanted to be with him. Our evenings became our thing. We'd watch old movies, argue about the best books, and laugh over my homework struggles. Even as I grew older, I cherished those moments with him. He wasn't just my dad, he was my best friend. When it came time for college, Dad insisted I go. "You need to spread your wings, kiddo," he said one night, rolling up beside me at the kitchen table. "Don't worry about me, I'll be fine." I wasn't so sure. The idea of leaving him felt wrong, but deep down, I knew he was right. So I packed my bags and headed to State University to major in accounting. It wasn't glamorous, but I wanted a career that would keep me stable, something Mom would have wanted for me. College was a whirlwind. It was there that I met my roommate, Jessica. She was the kind of person who could light up a room just by walking into it. We became inseparable, and through her, I met Michael. Michael wasn't like anyone I'd met before. He was funny, kind, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. When I told him about Dad, he didn't flinch. Instead, he asked thoughtful questions and seemed to respect how much I cared for him. The first time Michael met Dad, they clicked immediately. Bonding over their shared love of classic rock, they talked for hours while I watched in awe. Later, Michael told me, "Your old man's cool, Amanda. And you? You're amazing for taking care of him all these years." His words lit something inside me I hadn't felt in years. For the first time since Mom's death, I believed I could have a normal life. A life filled with love, laughter, and maybe even a family of my own. After graduating, things finally seemed to fall into place. I landed a steady job at a local tax service, and Michael started working as a long-haul truck driver. We dated for 2 years before he proposed on a crisp autumn evening in the park where we'd had our first date. I can still remember the way the leaves crunched under our feet and how his hands trembled as he held out the ring. I said yes, of course, but there was something I needed to make clear. "Michael, I can't leave my dad. He needs me." Michael didn't even hesitate. His face lit up with a grin. "I wouldn't have it any other way. We'll all live together. Your dad's apartment is big enough for the three of us, right?" He meant it. And on our wedding day, as Dad wheeled himself down the aisle to give me away, I knew I was marrying the right man. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living a fairy tale. But every fairy tale has its villains, and mine came in the form of Michael's mother, Karen, and his sister, Emily. From the moment I met them, it was clear they didn't approve of me. During our first meeting, Karen wrinkled her nose when I mentioned my dad. "So, your father is handicapped?" she asked, her tone dripping with something that wasn't quite curiosity. "He's disabled," I corrected, keeping my tone neutral. Karen waved her hand dismissively. "Same thing, and he works as an editor. How nice." Then she turned to Michael. "Are you sure about this? There are so many nice girls from good families." My face burned with anger, but Michael, bless him, jumped to my defense. "Mom, Amanda is from a good family. Her dad's disability doesn't change that. I love her, and that's all that matters." Karen shut up after that, but her disapproval lingered in every glance, every muttered comment. Emily wasn't any better. She followed Karen's lead, giving me cold, judgmental looks whenever we were in the same room. After the wedding, Michael kept his promise. He moved in with Dad and me, and the three of us built a life together. Michael was on the road a lot, but when he was home, we'd have dinner as a family, laughing and sharing stories from our week. Still, whenever Karen and Emily came over, the air in our house seemed to change. They strutted around like they owned the place, barely acknowledging Dad's presence. Once, I overheard Karen mutter to Emily, "It's a shame Michael could have done so much better. Now he's stuck with this girl and her crippled father. Can you imagine the genes if they had children?" I was furious but bit my tongue. Michael's family was complicated, and I didn't want to create a bigger rift. I tried to keep the peace, but it felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells. One evening, after a particularly tense visit from Karen and Emily, I broke down. Michael found me crying in our bedroom. "What's wrong?" he asked, pulling me into his arms. "Your mom and sister," I sobbed. "They hate me. They think I'm not good enough for you because of Dad." Michael's face hardened. "That's ridiculous. You and your dad are my family now. If they can't accept that, it's their problem, not ours." His words comforted me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen and Emily weren't done causing trouble. As time passed, life settled into a rhythm. Michael threw himself into his trucking business, often gone for days at a time. I missed him when he was on the road, but I kept busy with my job at the tax office and taking care of Dad. Our evenings were filled with laughter, old movies, and long talks in the garden we'd planted together. One crisp autumn evening, as I helped Dad get ready for bed, Michael called. His voice crackled with excitement. "Amanda, I've been thinking," he began. "How would you feel about buying a townhouse? It'd be easier for your dad to get around in his wheelchair. He could spend more time outside, and you could even have a garden to keep you busy when I'm on the road." I glanced at Dad, who was pretending not to eavesdrop, but his curious smile gave him away. "What do you think, Dad?" I asked, putting the phone on speaker. Dad's eyes lit up. "A garden would be nice," he admitted, "and it'd be easier to get outside." That settled it. Over the next few weeks, Michael and I threw ourselves into house hunting. We toured dozens of places before finding the perfect one: a spacious townhouse with wide doorways, a roll-in shower for Dad, and a beautiful backyard that was just begging for a garden. Taking out a mortgage was terrifying, but we made it work. Between Michael's income, mine, and the rent from Dad's old apartment, we managed to scrape together enough to buy the house. Moving day was a sunny Saturday in spring, and I'll never forget the look on Dad's face as he wheeled himself onto the patio for the first time. "This is perfect," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, sweetheart." The next few months were a dream. I spent my weekends planting vegetables and flowers in the backyard, and Dad would sit outside for hours, soaking up the sunshine. Life felt stable, almost idyllic. That was, until the housewarming party. We invited friends, neighbors, and yes, Karen and Emily. I knew better than to exclude them. It would only cause more drama, but I dreaded their arrival. Sure enough, they showed up fashionably late, strutting in like they owned the place. As we gave them a tour, I could see Karen's eyes darting around, mentally appraising everything. When we reached the master bedroom, she turned to me with a sly smile. "You know, Amanda," she said, her voice low and patronizing, "this room would be perfect for Michael and me. Why don't you send your father to a nursing home? Then I could move in here." I stared at her, stunned. "Excuse me?" "Oh, don't look so shocked," she continued, waving a hand dismissively. "Your father isn't well. He doesn't need all this space. A nursing home would be better for someone in his condition." Before I could respond, she turned on her heel and marched out to the patio where Dad was chatting with some guests. To my horror, Karen grabbed the handles of his wheelchair and started pushing him toward the driveway. "Karen!" I shouted, running after her. "What are you doing?" She smirked. "If he won't go to a nursing home, he can stay outside. Isn't that what you wanted? For him to be outdoors?" Rage and disbelief surged through me. Thankfully, Michael had overheard the commotion. He stormed out, his face red with anger. "Mom, what the hell are you doing? Let go of Mark's chair, right now." Karen looked shocked at Michael's tone but quickly recovered. "Honey, I don't want to hear it," he snapped, cutting her off. "You and Emily need to leave, now." They left in a huff, but not before Karen turned to me with a venomous sneer. "This isn't over, Amanda. You'll be hearing from our lawyers." That night, as Michael and I sat with Dad, I couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and relief. Karen and Emily had finally crossed a line, and Michael had stood up for us. Still, a part of me worried about what they might do next. For a while, things quieted down after the housewarming incident. Karen and Emily kept their distance, which suited me just fine. Michael threw himself into his work, taking on more long-haul routes to help cover the mortgage. I kept busy with my job at the tax office, tending to the garden, and spending time with Dad. Our days were simple, but they were good. 2 years passed in the blink of an eye. Dad's health remained stable, and our little family found its rhythm. When Michael was home, the three of us would sit on the patio, sharing stories and laughing over dinner. It felt like we were building something solid, a life we could be proud of. Then came the call that shattered everything. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning, and I was at work, buried in spreadsheets, when my phone rang. The unfamiliar number gave me a strange sense of dread, but I answered anyway. "Mrs. Thompson?" a man's voice asked. "Yes, this is Amanda," I replied hesitantly. "This is Officer Rodriguez from the Highway Patrol," he said, his tone grave. "I'm sorry to inform you that your husband, Michael Thompson, has been in a serious accident." The rest of the conversation became a blur. Words like head-on collision and "didn't make it" floated around me, but I couldn't process them. I barely remembered hanging up the phone. It wasn't until I looked down and saw my shaking hands that the reality began to sink in. Michael was gone. The next week was a haze of grief and disbelief. I moved through the motions of planning the funeral like a robot, barely able to comprehend what was happening. The day before the service, I steeled myself and called Karen. No matter how much she'd hurt me, she deserved to hear about Michael's death from me, not a newspaper obituary. When she answered, her voice was sharp and impatient. "What is it, Amanda?" I swallowed hard. "Karen, it's about Michael. He's gone. There was an accident." There was silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought she might show some humanity. But when she spoke again, her voice dripped with venom. "This is your fault," she hissed. "You forced him to work so hard, driving that truck to pay for your fancy house. You killed my son." I was stunned. "Karen, Save it," she snapped. "I expect you to give him the best funeral money can buy, but don't expect a penny from us. You made your bed, now lie in it." She hung up before I could respond. I stood there, phone in hand, tears streaming down my face. How could she be so cruel? How could she blame me for this? The day of Michael's funeral was gray and drizzly, as if the weather itself shared my sorrow. The church was packed. Michael had been well liked, and it seemed like half the town had come to pay their respects. But Karen and Emily didn't bother to show up. Their absence stung, but Dad reached over and squeezed my hand. They're lost, sweetheart, he said gently. We're family, and we'll get through this together. After the service, we returned home, hoping for some peace. But as we pulled into the driveway, I noticed something off. The lights were on in the house, even though I was certain I'd turned them off before we left. Did you leave anything on, Dad? I asked, frowning. He shook his head. No, I don't think so. My heart raced as we approached the front door. Were we being robbed? On the day of Michael's funeral? I helped Dad out of the car and into his wheelchair, my mind spinning with fear. Should I call the police? But as we stepped inside, my fears were replaced by a different kind of shock. Karen and Emily were in our living room, surrounded by boxes and furniture. What the hell is going on here? I demanded, my grief momentarily forgotten in the face of their outrageous intrusion. Karen turned to me, her face a mask of false sympathy. Oh, Amanda, dear. We're just helping you pack up. After all, you can't possibly afford to keep this place now that Michael's gone. I stared at her, speechless. Emily chimed in with a sickly sweet smile. Don't worry, you can go back to your father's apartment. It's cozy. That was it. The grief, the anger, the sheer exhaustion of the past week boiled over. Get out, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Get out of my house right now. Karen had the audacity to look offended. This house belongs to us now. All of Michael's property does. We're his family, after all. Like hell you are, I exploded. Where were you today? At his funeral? Oh, that's right. You couldn't be bothered to show up. Karen waved a hand dismissively. We were busy making arrangements. Now be a good girl and start packing. I'm calling the police, I said, pulling out my phone. Karen and Emily exchanged worried glances, clearly not expecting me to fight back. Karen tried to protest, but I cut her off. No, you have 5 minutes to leave before I call the cops. This is my home. Michael and I bought it together. You have no right to be here. For once, Karen seemed to realize she'd gone too far. With a sneer, she gathered her things and left, dragging Emily with her. But as she walked out the door, she turned to me one last time. This isn't over, Amanda. You'll be hearing from our lawyers. The days following Michael's funeral were a whirlwind of grief, anxiety, and paperwork. I threw myself into sorting out his affairs, partly to stay busy, and partly to protect what was rightfully ours. I didn't trust Karen and Emily to stay away. A week later, I received a call from a local law firm. My heart raced as I answered, half expecting Karen's threats to have materialized into legal action. Instead, a calm, professional voice greeted me. Mrs. Thompson, this is James Anderson from Anderson & Partners. I'm calling about your late husband's will. His words caught me off guard. Will? I didn't know Michael had one. Yes, ma'am. He came to see us about 6 months ago. He asked us to contact you in the event of his passing. The next morning, I wheeled Dad into Mr. Anderson's office. The lawyer greeted us warmly and gestured for us to sit near his desk. First, let me say I'm very sorry for your loss, he began. Then, he opened a file and started reading Michael's will aloud. I, Michael Thompson, being of sound mind, do hereby bequeath all my worldly possessions to my beloved wife, Amanda Thompson. This includes our home, my truck, and all our savings. It is my wish that Amanda use these resources to care for herself and her father, Mark Morgan, whom I have come to love as my own. Tears streamed down my face as Mr. Anderson finished. Even from beyond the grave, Michael was looking out for us. There's more, Mr. Anderson said gently, handing me an envelope. He also left you a letter. My hands trembled as I opened it. My dearest Amanda, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm so sorry for leaving you and Mark. Please know that you two were the best thing that ever happened to me. I made this will because I know how my mother and sister can be. I didn't want to worry you, but I needed to make sure you and Mark were protected if anything happened to me. You're my real family, Amanda. You and Mark. Not them. Take care of each other. Live your lives to the fullest and know that I'll always be watching over you. All my love, Michael. I clutched the letter to my chest, sobbing. Dad reached over and patted my arm, tears shining in his eyes. There's one more thing, Mr. Anderson added after giving us a moment. Michael's truck was insured, and given the circumstances of the accident, the insurance company will be paying out the full value of the policy. What does that mean? I asked, wiping my tears. It means, he said with a small smile, that you'll receive a substantial sum, enough to pay off your mortgage, and then some. As we left the lawyer's office, a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying lifted off my shoulders. We were going to be okay. Michael had made sure of it, but Karen and Emily weren't done. When we returned home, their sleek sedan was parked outside. My stomach churned as I walked up to the porch, but this time I wasn't afraid. I had Michael's letter in my pocket and his love in my heart. Karen's voice was sickly sweet as she began. Amanda, we need to talk about Michael's estate. I met her gaze steadily. No, Karen. We don't. Michael left everything to me. It's legal, official, and you know why. Because we were his real family, not you. Her mouth opened in shock, but I wasn't done. Now please leave. You're trespassing on my property. For once, she was speechless. Emily tugged at her arm, whispering something urgently. With one last glare, they got in their car and drove away. The weeks that followed were a mix of bittersweet moments. I poured myself into settling Michael's affairs, grateful for the distraction from my grief. One afternoon, while going through his desk, I found a small notebook filled with his messy handwriting. It was a journal of sorts, full of thoughts and plans for our future. Thinking about starting a college fund for our future kids, one entry read. Want to make sure they have the best start in life. Fresh tears welled up as I held the notebook close. We'd talked about kids, but we'd decided to wait until we were more financially stable. Now, I'd never get to share those dreams with him. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to shake the bittersweet ache of reading Michael's hopes and plans. Eventually, I drifted into a dream where Michael was smiling, holding out his hand to me. It's okay, Amanda, he said softly. Everything's going to be all right. The next morning, I woke up feeling different. There was a flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks, hope. But as I got ready for work, a wave of nausea hit me. At first, I chalked it up to stress and grief, but the feeling lingered. Finally, I found myself standing in the pharmacy aisle, staring at a pregnancy test. 3 agonizing minutes later, I saw 2 clear blue lines. I sank to the floor, overwhelmed by a mix of joy, fear, and grief. When I finally opened the bathroom door, Dad was waiting. Everything okay in there? He asked, his voice tinged with concern. I held up the test with shaking hands. I'm pregnant, Dad. His expression softened, and he pulled me into a hug. It's okay, sweetheart. This baby is a gift, a piece of Michael that will live on. His words struck a chord in me. This child was a part of Michael, a continuation of our love. As my belly grew, so did my resolve. Dad and I built a new routine, focusing on the future we'd create for this little life. We planted vegetables in the garden together, imagining the day when a tiny pair of hands would help us harvest. One sunny afternoon, as I pulled weeds, Karen's sedan pulled up again. This time, her demeanor was different, almost desperate. Amanda, she began, her voice shaky. We need help. Emily and I have hit some hard times. Could we stay in your father's old apartment, just until we get back on our feet? I stood tall, one hand instinctively cradling my swollen belly. I'm sorry, I said firmly. That's not possible. I don't want to communicate with you anymore. Karen's eyes narrowed when she noticed my stomach. You're pregnant? Already? You little… I cut her off. My personal life is none of your concern. Now please leave. For the first time, Karen had no response. She turned and left with Emily, leaving me standing on the porch, feeling a quiet strength I hadn't known I had. Michael would have been proud. Story 2. My wife filed for divorce once she got back in shape and realized she could outperform me, but she soon came to regret it. Hello everyone. Prior to starting today's video, I need your assistance. One of the greatest ways you can help us out is to subscribe, since we've observed the channel is losing some of its popularity. It's simple, free, and helps us continue to provide you with amazing content. Your assistance is much appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. Let's begin the video now. How are you all doing? Dave is here. Hold on tight. Because not long ago, my life became a crazy disaster. My age is 34. Just your typical Columbus warehouse manager. Although it wasn't glamorous, my life was stable. I was married to Carla, had a great home, and an excellent career. After 3 years of marriage and 5 years of dating, I believed we were doing well together. Even though we weren't the ideal pair on TV, we managed to make it work. Bills were paid. We went on our date evenings, and the occasional disagreement was a natural part of marriage. Or so I believed. Carla made the decision to go on a significant fitness journey around 6 months ago. I was on board, even though it was unexpected. She joined a fancy gym in the heart of the city that, to be honest, looked more like a spa than a gym. After hiring Justin as her personal trainer, she abruptly began discussing diet planning, macros, and detox regimens. It didn't bother me. Actually, I urged her, motivated. After all, who doesn't deserve to feel good about themselves? I also assumed it was a passing phase, similar to her brief interest in knitting, or when she started playing tarot cards. I even offered to help her at first. To give her more time to concentrate on her exercises, I began doing more of the dishes, laundry, and grocery shopping. I believed it was a way to let her know I was interested, but things gradually began to change, and not in a positive manner. Carla's ego increased as she shed more pounds. She developed an obsession with her image, spending hours in front of the mirror, adjusting her workout attire, or taking the ideal Instagram progress photo. This wasn't something she was doing for herself alone. She desired a crowd. I recall suggesting that we see a movie together one time. I hoped we could unwind as we always did on a Friday night. She laughed. I have no time to sit around, Dave. I have objectives to smash. Objectives? What objectives? We weren't discussing Everest climbing or a marathon race. All she was doing was drinking green sludge and exercising weights. But whatever, I dismissed it. Perhaps it was me who was being unreasonable. Then the morning arrived. It began as any other. Carla was eating her normal kale spinach catastrophe smoothie while I was half sleepy, nursing my coffee before going to work. She was looking at her phone as if her life depended on it, while wearing her training attire. I deserve better in life, she replies abruptly. Still feeling sleepy, I looked up. More of what? She set down her smoothie and gave me a serious look. Dave, I'm being held back by this marriage. I'm going to file for divorce. I believe I mistook it for a joke. Even though she wasn't laughing, I thought she was playing a practical joke on me. Her expression was icy. This is too much for me. She spoke as if I were an old piece of furniture that she was prepared to discard. You wouldn't comprehend. I was really caught off guard as I sat there. My wife, with whom I had spent years of my life, suddenly threw this at me as if it were nothing out of the ordinary. I tried to take in what she had said, but all I could feel was a mixture of rage and disbelief that was building inside of me. What are you saying? You're too old for this? What has been outgrown? As if I were a child asking too many questions, she let out a sigh. Dave. In an effort to become the greatest version of myself, I have been working on myself. To be honest, my potential is no longer matched by this existence. This house is not all I want. This pattern, this you. I was struck by what she said. There was no sugarcoating on her part. She saw me as contributing to the issue. She no longer found the life we had created together satisfactory. Without saying goodbye, she picked up her workout bag and left the room. She left a half-empty glass of green sludge behind, and I sat there looking at it. I'm wondering how in the world this happened. It was a hazy day at work. I followed the procedures, but Carla was on my mind all the time. Was this thing for real? Was she really going to abandon me? We had already argued. Yes, but get a divorce. It seemed so planned, so abrupt, as well as her delivery, as if she had spent weeks practicing her speech, made it apparent that she had already decided. The flaws in our marriage became painfully apparent over the course of the following few days. She almost ever talked to me unless it was to arrange mediation or divide up the house. She began staying out late, saying she was with friends or at the gym. Her Instagram was exploding with photos and phrases like new chapter, who dis, and living my best life, while her phone was glued to her hand. Even if the paperwork weren't signed yet, every post was a reminder that she had already moved on psychologically. While looking through my own social media one evening, I discovered that she had erased every photo of us together. Gone are the wedding pictures. Posts from the anniversary were deleted. It was as though I had been completely erased from her existence. In the meantime, others were pumping her up with likes and comments on her latest posts. "You're radiant. What a source of inspiration." I felt ill from it. These folks had no idea who the real Carla was or what she was doing to me. I was getting ready for work one night when I heard her on the phone. In the kitchen, she was speaking to someone in that phony, sweet voice she used to get what she wanted. "Yes. I feel so liberated now," I said. She said, "At last I'm doing what brings me joy." She stopped, then burst out laughing. He's not even understanding it. He is enmeshed in the past. That's when it dawned on me. Carla wasn't simply abandoning me. She was changing who she was. I was the anchor too. She was slashing. Here's the problem though. I'm not the type of person who simply rolls over and accepts it. She was going to have a harsh awakening since she believed she could just steamroll me and take everything away. This was only the start. Carla would get a fight if she wanted one. But hold on, things get worse. I'm having lunch at this cafe close to work one day. When I hear these two guys at the next table, I'm just going about my business and browsing through my phone. They are discussing a fitness model they came across on the internet. It wasn't until one of them called her name that I really paid attention. Carla. I felt sick to my stomach. They were giggling as they discussed the premium stuff she was pushing. Not Carla, I initially assumed. However, one of them then displayed her Instagram on his mobile device. Mike was her. Carla. They continued by talking about how she had begun to tease an OnlyFans account by including links to the actual exercises in her bio. It made my blood boil. This wasn't merely a phase of fitness. She was turning into a full-fledged, money-hungry person by abusing her newfound independence. I went to her when I came home. As if nothing had occurred, she was looking through her phone while seated on the couch. Trying not to lose my temper, I said, "Carla, I'm hearing about OnlyFans, but what the devil is it?" She looked up, utterly unconcerned. "Dave, it's my body, my decision. Additionally, it is no longer your concern." Her courage astounded me. "It's none of my business. We're still wed. While I'm trying to keep our lives together, you're out there trying to sell yourself online." As if I were some archaic dinosaur who simply didn't understand, she rolled her eyes. "It's not self-promotion. It's the production of content. Many people do it. Furthermore, it's not as if you're now covering my expenses." It dawned on me then. Carla's desire went beyond a simple divorce. She won a whole other existence, one in which she was the protagonist and the star, and she had written me off as an extra. She didn't feel guilty or sorry. She was, if anything, proud. It seemed as though she had at last discovered her actual vocation as an internet sensation. Her antics got worse over the course of the following few weeks. She began to dress as though she were going to a reality show audition. High-heeled shoes, tight gowns, and frosting-like makeup. She always left with the impression that she was going to a red carpet event rather than the grocery shop, as well as the captions. They worsened. "Living my truth. Holding back is over." I also wanted to throw my phone at that one. She is no longer a wife. She is a natural power, the boldness. I was left to handle the fallout, lawsuits, paperwork, etc., while Carla was off having fun as a celebrity. Carla was not as untouchable as she believed, however. Steve, absolute legend, my lawyer, had been investigating. She has been seeing a gold digger, but he has a gym membership, it turns out. You may probably guess who I'm referring to. People, stay tuned. A mess is going to break out. I'll give you a quick update. He updated one. What's going on again? Reddit. Dave, your favorite soon-to-be divorced man, is here to witness my ex's drama-filled glow-up catastrophe up close. My wife Carla thought she was too good for this life, As you may have noticed if you've been following along, she has been strutting about town like a fitness celebrity and left me high and dry. Let's speak about the man who has been causing all of this, though. Justin. Yes, her own personal trainer. Authentic original. Correct. As soon as I heard his name, I realized that this was no ordinary trainer-client connection. The kind of man you would expect to see on a reality dating program was Justin, shredded, spray-tanned, and roughly puddle-deep. Like he stepped out of a horrible romantic comedy, he exuded charisma, biceps, and smirks. Carla also made no secret of their relationship. After working out one day, she virtually glowed as she walked around the house. "I'm stronger than I've ever been," according to Justin. Without even glancing at me, she boasted. "That's his script, Carla, and I'm sure Justin informed you that he has never trained someone like you before." She quit acting like it was simply exercise a few weeks later. In casual conversation, she began to mention his name. "I'm going to this new vegan restaurant with Justin," or, as Justin put it, "This protein powder is transformative." In the meantime, I'm standing there wondering if I appear to care. Carla wasn't only mentioning names, though. She was showing him off as if he were her trophy. Word quickly got out. My friends began emailing me about seeing Carla and Justin around town. They were laughing, holding hands, and acting like the year's most popular Instagram pair. Carla made no effort to conceal it. She boldly said, "Just so you know, Justin and I are dating now," when she returned home one evening. "It's time for you to accept that, in my opinion." Yes, I did accept it, okay? I came to terms with the fact that my wife had become a complete caricature of entitlement. She had already separated from me in her mind. What difference did it make to her if she included a public event on her resume? My anger grew as I discovered more about Justin. Bro, he wasn't your typical Jim. This individual had a past. My attorney, Steve, who, after doing some research, discovered that Justin had previously done this act and is now deserving of a freaking award. Actually, twice. He followed a pattern. Look for a married woman. Encourage her to divorce her spouse by giving her lots of praise and affirmation. Then, like Houdini, he would disappear after the money stopped coming and the dust cleared. Justin wrecked houses professionally. It wasn't affection. It was a flurry. He exaggerated these ladies, gave them a sense of invincibility, and surfed their wave until it became inconvenient. Carla, too. She was the ideal target. She yearned for approval and attention, as a fish longs for water. She was unaware that Justin had her ensnared in his finger. What was worse was his arrogance about it. Mutual acquaintances informed me that Justin was already discussing their ambitious goals. Apparently, he told someone. "Carla and I are planning to start an empire when the divorce is finalized." Empire? You're a trainer, not a tech tycoon. But you have big dreams, dude. Justin wasn't only using Carla's money as collateral. He was using my money as collateral. Carla was attempting to seize the house, claiming spousal support and half of my savings. She believed she could play the victim, go into court, and get away with a golden ticket for her new life with Justin. She had no idea that my lawyer had receipts, and I had no intention of rolling over. Let me give you a glimpse of Carla and Justin's appearance together. Imagine a lady who suddenly believes she is a Kardashian standing next to a guy who only owns tank shirts. They were all over social media, tagging themselves at pricey restaurants and posing in front of nice automobiles that weren't theirs. Carla was probably paying for it. They seemed to be shouting, "Look at us! We're triumphant." However, it was obvious to anyone with half a brain that they were overcompensating. But there were rifts in their connection. Carla's developing diva mentality began to collide with Justin's exaggerated personality. I overheard her arguing with someone on the phone in the kitchen one evening. "Justin, I don't give a damn about what your ex says about you. I deserve better than your baggage now that you're with me." Even though I missed the rest, it was clear to me that their little dream wasn't as flawless as they wanted everyone to think. Watching Carla go all in on Justin was somehow rewarding, even though it annoyed me. She believed he was her ticket to a better life, therefore she would risk everything on him. Furthermore, the collapse of the House of Cards was inevitable. I was making sure of that with my lawyer. Carla's confidence plummeted after mediation. She entered the room pretending to be Beyoncé, and left with the appearance of a deer in headlights. It was lovely. Her devoted hype man, Justin, made no attempt to console her. He simply sulked while using his phone to browse behind her. My first hint that their small kingdom wasn't as strong as Carla wanted everyone to think was that. Let's go back a little, though. For Carla, mediation was more than simply a setback. It was a catastrophe. She was about to enter, shed a tear or two, and leave the house. Spousal support and half of my savings. Carla's attorney portrayed her as the unappreciated spouse who gave up all for my unimpressive aspirations. Just ordinary dreams, you know? For years I've been putting forth a ton of effort at my warehouse job. My lawyer was prepared, Steve. He supported me with images, spreadsheets, and even credit card statements. Before Carla filed for divorce, she had been destroying our joint account for months. We're discussing $200 dinners, fancy clothing, and opulent spa days. I was attempting to find out what went wrong while eating leftovers. Steve ensured that every money she squandered was seen by the court. Then Justin arrived. Skeletons, his previous extramarital encounters, his habit of charming married ladies, and the way he consistently backed off when the money didn't come in as planned. The icing on the cake, Steve discovered communications from Justin's former partner. Carla is being cautioned. Carla didn't listen, of course. She believed she was unique. Justin had also lost his grin. He actually appeared genuinely uneasy. In real time, he likely knew his little con was falling apart. Justin isn't like that anymore, Carla said in an attempt to defend him. However, the odds were stacked against them. Their performance was not accepted by the court. At the conclusion of the meeting, Carla was obviously not going to leave with the money she had anticipated. Justin. It appeared as though he was already formulating his plan of departure. Carla began acting strangely after the mediation. She had lost her cockiness. On Instagram, she continued to share her inspirational gibberish, but the messages became frantic. It was more like that than living my best life. Although it's not always simple, growth is worthwhile. Yes, of course. Carla. Remind yourself of it. Conversely, Justin was displaying his genuine nature. Though he wasn't as present as Carla said, he was still there. He began to miss their public appearances. No more couple goals or hand-holding at upscale eateries. Pictures from the gym. Rumor circulated that he was already having an affair with a younger client of his, who reportedly didn't carry Carla's burden. Normal. Carla arrived home late one evening. Since I couldn't legally evict her, I was still living in the house with her at the time, and she looked very exhausted when she staggered in. I said nothing at all. I simply sat on the couch and observed her. She let out a loud sigh and placed her high-end purse on the counter, as if she wanted me to inquire about the issue. However, I wasn't engaging in that activity. I simply made my way to my room. Carla made an effort to pretend that nothing was wrong the following morning. Her typical smugness vanished when she made one of her kale smoothies while walking around the kitchen. Suddenly she added, "Justin has been busy with his clients." I didn't answer. I was not satisfying her, even though I knew she wanted me to bite and inquire about him. The true drama began a week later. Steve gave me a call. Carla had apparently submitted some last-minute papers in an attempt to get further assets. She sought emotional restitution for the marital turmoil I had caused her. Yes, you read correctly. Carla believed that by accusing me of causing her midlife crisis, she might increase her income. I was astounded by the boldness. The legendary Steve had already braced himself for this bullshit. In a countersuit, he demonstrated how Carla had embezzled our money and used emotional manipulation to her benefit. He even provided evidence in the form of her Instagram postings. She was a self-centered diva, living her best life at my cost, not some stressed-out victim, as the captions alone amply demonstrated. At this point, Justin formally became Mia. He stopped returning her calls, stopped attending their workouts, and even banned her on Instagram. Indeed, it is blocked. Carla was going crazy. She kept calling him as she paced the house, and I could hear it. "Give me a call back, Justin. We must speak." To be honest, it was nice to hear how desperate she sounded. The tea was eventually spilled by one of her pals. The client Justin had moved on to was younger, more glamorous, and, most importantly, not involved in a contentious divorce. Carla was heartbroken. She posted cryptic phrases like, Sometimes people aren't who they seem, and you can't build an empire with someone who's playing games in an attempt to appear cool. However, everyone was aware of what had occurred. The moment things became difficult, her ideal partner had abandoned her. At this point, Carla's sense of entitlement began to really deteriorate. She no longer attended the gym. Sweats and disheveled buns took the place of her formerly glitzy attire. To be honest, it was astonishing that she even stopped posting on Instagram for a spell. It seemed as though Justin and the idea of their new existence had become the very core of who she was, and she had no idea what to do without him. She made an attempt to speak with me one evening. Standing at the living room doorway, she said, "Dave, I believe that everything about this divorce has to be re-examined. Both of us have had a difficult time." Awaiting the punchline, I gazed at her. "Carla, what are you saying?" She let out a loud sigh, as if she were the sufferer. "I simply believe that we may have hurried into this. After all, didn't we have a nice time?" It nearly made me chuckle. "You filed for divorce, Carla. I was holding you back, you said. Do you recall? You're reconsidering now that Justin is gone, incredibly so. Talking about how lonely she was and how much she had given up for this marriage, she attempted to play the pity card. However, I didn't believe it. Carla." I interrupted her. I said, "Your bed was prepared by you. Lay in it now." I didn't have to do anything to help Carlos's small dream world come apart. It was all karma's doing. For now, that's all. Go through it. I'll keep you informed following the court's final ruling. You won't want to miss it, I promise. The second update. Hello, Dave. Go back and read it. Prepare yourself for the grand slam of this entire fiasco, because you have put up with me this long. Carla, if you've been following along, my former spouse believed she could go to court, take everything, and begin a new life with her personal trainer, Justin. However, karma called, and we are now nearing the end. I'll tell you how the drama unfolded in court, and the reasons Carla most likely wishes she had never entered their court. At last, day arrived. When Carla entered, it wasn't the typical diva strut I had become accustomed to. No cocky smile, no designer jacket. Only her and her attorney. Appearing as self-assured as two children entering a correctional facility. She must have realized that things would not work out for her. There was a lack of energy. And to be honest, I quite enjoyed it. Steve, my lawyer, and I were on the opposite side. With a binder so thick it might have served as a doorstop, he arrived ready. By now, I was not anxious. I had nothing to lose. Carla had already used all of her punches, and I was still upright. Making sure I didn't simply get through this was the goal of today. I prevailed. Her attorney began by outlining Carla's emotional compensation claim, which I previously discussed with you. She portrayed Carla as a long-suffering wife who had been emotionally depleted by my failure to encourage her personal development. It seems that I had neglected her by not encouraging her fitness quest, which included her romance with Justin. My lawyer, Steve, let her lawyer continue for a while so they could dig their own hole. Next came our turn. Steve began by methodically dissecting their disagreement. He provided proof that in addition to helping Carla, I had gone above and above for her on her purported fitness quest. He showed evidence that I had taken over the housework, changed my work schedule, and even urged her to go after her dreams. He read aloud text messages in which I urged her to go to the gym, offered to prepare nutritious meals for her, and even recommended that we take couples fitness courses to further our relationship. Then Steve revealed the secret. Carla's claim for emotional compensation wasn't merely unfounded. It was an obvious attempt to hide her own emotional carelessness. He showed me messages and emails in which Carla publicly made fun of me to her friends, calling me dead weight and uninteresting. He even had screenshots of her calling me her backup plan and boasting about Justin. However, Steve's handling of Carla's claim's financial component was the final nail in the coffin. He produced our bank statements, which demonstrated how Carla had used our joint account to siphon off thousands of dollars for her opulent lifestyle. Steve's lawyer attempted to push back, but he wasn't finished. He revealed the most important piece of evidence, a diary entry Steve had subpoenaed from Carla. It detailed Carla's grand scheme to get out of this marriage, leave me, and use the settlement money to finance her new life with Justin. The judge's expression upon reading that utter incredulity. As the judge went through the documents, his grim face becoming more serious with every page, the courtroom became silent. Across from her, Carla's confidence, which she had displayed so confidently throughout mediation, had vanished into thin air as she sat next to her lawyer, her glossy nails pounding frantically against the table. I sat with my lawyer, Steve, feeling both satisfied and excited. It was this. That's when everything Carla had woven into her story would fall apart. The judge started by discussing Carla's claim for emotional compensation. Patterson, Mrs. His voice was forceful, yet steady as he spoke. There is no real evidence to support your emotional compensation claims. He took a moment to process the words, then went on. However, in certain situations, mental anguish is a legitimate factor. This court demands unambiguous and substantiated evidence. Subjective sentiments, not facts, are the foundation of your statements. His focus shifted to Steve's rebuttal suggestions. He described the Instagram captions, bank accounts, and phone exchanges that gave a very different image than the one Carla and her attorney had attempted to create. Speaking to me for the first time, the judge stated, "Mr. Patterson, you have shown a clear and consistent pattern of support for your wife during the marriage. There is no sign of emotional neglect in the evidence presented. Actually, it implies the reverse. To meet her needs and fulfill her dreams, you went above and beyond." After fumbling over an objection that the evidence was taken out of context, Carla's attorney attempted to interrupt. The judge held up a hand to quiet him. "Counselor, the context is obvious. Let's go on." The judge next discussed the case's financial aspects. He carefully went over the proof that Steve had given Mrs. Patterson. With an increasingly icy tone, the judge spoke. "Prior to filing for divorce, you took out more than $23,000 from your joint accounts. Neither shared necessities nor home costs were covered by these monies. Rather, they were used for upscale restaurants, personal pleasures, and luxury goods. The court determines that this conduct is reckless and a clear breach of your marriage financial responsibilities." Carla's cheeks became a deep scarlet as she writhed in her chair. Her attorney tried to minimize the expenditure by saying it was a coping strategy she used during a trying period. The magistrate was not impressed. He emphasized sternly that financial irresponsibility is not justified by coping techniques. The House followed. Carla had asserted with confidence that she should get half of it because she had helped maintain it, at least emotionally, if not monetarily. Steve was prepared for this. He produced documentation demonstrating that, despite Carla's lack of contribution, I had fully paid off the mortgage, kept up the home, and even managed improvements. The judge wasn't holding back. Mr. Patterson indicated that the house will remain his property. Patterson, Mrs. According to the facts, you have no financial claim to it. Carla's mouth fell open. Too astonished to react, she waved her lawyer away when he whispered something in her ear. The judge had not finished. In addition, he stated that Mrs. Patterson must pay back Mr. Patterson $23,750 because of the unlawful use of marital finances. A pin may have been dropped. Clearly defeated, Carla's lawyer sagged in his chair. It was as though someone had taken Carla's breath away. She was left with nothing except the results of her actions when her meticulously planned storyline crashed in a dramatic way. The decision was final. No loopholes, no appeals. "This court is adjourned," the judge declared, closing his folder. A rush of relaxation washed over me as I reclined in my chair. I felt like I could breathe again for the first time in months after justice was done. The tension in the air was evident as they left the courtroom. Without making eye contact, Carla's lawyer was already packing his suitcase. Carla followed him, her head drooping, as befitted someone who had entered this procedure with the self-assurance of a reality TV personality. She seemed completely defeated now. As we left, Steve gave me a pat on the back. He smiled slightly and added, "We did it." I gave a nod, appreciative of his efforts. He had revealed the truth about Carla's deceptive methods, in addition to standing up for me. I couldn't help but look back at Carla as I left the courthouse. She remained standing there, gazing at the floor in blankness. I experienced a fleeting pang of sympathy, but it soon subsided. She was now dealing with the fallout from the mayhem she had caused. The consequences of the decision became abundantly clear over the course of the following few days. I made careful to implement Carla's instruction to leave the residence within 30 days. She made an effort to delay, saying she needed more time to organize her affairs. I didn't move, though. She had plenty of time to get ready, I told her. She reluctantly packed up her belongings and moved out as she was busy showing off her romance with Justin. It was strangely pleasant to watch her go that last day. She packed her high-end bags into an antique vehicle. Apparently, she had borrowed it from one of her pals, who then drove away without saying goodbye. The tense, resentful atmosphere in the home abruptly subsided. Carla's financial condition rapidly deteriorated. Without my salary or the marriage money she had been stealing, the woman was left on her own. She attempted to sell some of her high-end clothing and purses, but the proceeds were insufficient to pay off the debt she owed me. Rumor circulated that she was taking out loans from pals who were becoming sick of hearing her cry all the time. Justin, on the other hand, completely disappeared. Her calls and mails were unanswered by him. About 2 weeks following the decision, Carla unexpectedly turned up at the house one evening. She was standing there when I opened the door. Her unkempt hair and weary eyes replaced her once immaculate beauty. She appeared to have gone days without sleep. Her voice cracked and she murmured softly, "Dave, can we have a conversation?" I shut the door behind me and went outdoors. "Carla, what do you want?" She wrung her hands with hesitation. "I only wanted to apologize for everything. I made some serious mistakes. I gave in to Justin's manipulation. I became engrossed in this daydream. Everything was damaged by me." The despair in her eyes was genuine, even though her remarks seemed prepared. She wasn't here to express sincere regret. She had nowhere else to go, so she came here. I said in a calm but forceful tone, "I'm not sure what you're expecting me to say. Your decisions were your own. Justin was your choice. You made the decision to attempt to take everything away from me, and now you have to cope with the consequences." Her eyes filled with tears. "Can't we at least be polite, please? Perhaps begin anew." "Dave, I have nothing. I don't know." I felt nothing but resolution as I looked at her for a while. "I gave it all to you, Carla. My love, my trust, and my support. You also tossed everything out. Now is not the time for you to return and request another opportunity. This isn't how it operates." I didn't cringe when she broke down and started crying on my doorstep. I took a step back inside and shut the door after a time, leaving her outside with her regrets. I've moved on since that day. According to what I've heard, Carla is still having trouble getting back on her feet. She's lost friends, damaged relationships, and now has to face the consequences of her own decisions. Karma sometimes kicks down the door rather than merely knocking. And Carla was left with nothing except the results of her deeds. Story 3. My stepsister broke off our engagement, claiming that my fiancé was cheating on her and that he was the father of her child. Hello, everyone. To be honest, I never imagined that I would be writing this. But I need to let everything out since my life has totally fallen apart. Since you need to know the backdrop before I can tell you what happened during my engagement party, I suppose I'll start at the beginning. I am a 27-year-old woman who has been with my 30-year-old fiancé for 4 years. Alex. Let's call him. We were introduced by mutual acquaintances, and to be honest, it was one of those few occasions when everything fell into place. Alex is a kind man who works hard and remembers small details about individuals. I genuinely believed he was a complete victory, and he has always been my rock. This engagement party was meant to be a celebration of all the love and work we've put into creating our life together, and we've been planning our wedding for months. Come on in, Kara. She is my stepsister, who is 32 years old. Furthermore, if I were to describe our relationship in a single word, it would most likely be tense. We are not and have never been close. After my mom married her father, Kara and I grew up in the same home. Kara, who was already a teenager when I was 10, made it apparent right away that she had no interest in having a younger stepsister. She started blaming me for everything that went wrong in her life over the years. In some way, I was to blame if she failed an exam. She would accuse me of flirting with her boyfriend, even though I had no interest in him, if he broke up with her. She seemed to need someone to blame all the time, and I was generally that person. As we grew older, nothing changed. In her late 20s, Kara married a man called Matt, and for a time, it appeared as though she was becoming settled. Then, however, her marriage broke down. As usual, she attributed her reasoning to me. Whatever that means, I didn't help her enough when she was going through a difficult period. After her divorce, she didn't talk to me for months, which I didn't mind at all. It felt like I could finally breathe without Kara's continual negativity, since she has a way of sucking the vitality from any space she's in. I chose to invite her to my engagement party, in spite of everything. I realize it sounds foolish, but I wanted to be a more mature person. I reasoned that perhaps this would be a new beginning for us, or at least a means of maintaining harmony for our parents' benefit. Kara stated she wouldn't be able to make it, and offered me a hazy reason about having other arrangements when I emailed her the invitation. To be honest, I wasn't shocked. The idea that the ceremony would go without her theatrics gave me a sense of relief. The actual celebration exceeded my expectations, at least initially. We were joined in celebrating by friends, relatives, and even a few of Alex's co-workers. People were having fun, chatting, and laughing. While we were out and about, Alex and I spoke to everyone and took in all of the encouragement and love. I was just beginning to unwind when I realized that this night was ideal. The venue's doors crashed open. It was like something from a movie, I promise. Everyone turned to find Kara standing there holding my nephew, who is 5 years old, in her arms. We will refer to him as Ethan. She was displaying him as though he were a trophy, and there was this strange mixture of elation and rage on her face. Everything was quiet in the room, and my only thought was, why in the world is she here? Despite the fact that my stomach was turning around, I made an effort to remain composed and welcomed her with a kind smile. Though I had no clue what she was going to do, I assumed she had come to make a scene. She walked right to the front of the room and brushed by me as if I didn't exist before I could say anything. She proclaimed that she had something essential to say and snatched up the microphone we had been using for toasts. I felt like the earth was about to give way beneath me at that very moment, and she launched into her statement without hesitation. She said, her voice breaking over the music and conversation, "I know this isn't my party. However, I must make a significant statement, something that everyone in this room should be aware of." As everyone's eyes shifted to her, the room became quiet. I could see the bewilderment on people's expressions as if this were a joke or a hoax. However, she went on to say, "My son Ethan is fathered by Alex." The audience echoed with gasps. I went cold. I was unable to comprehend what she had just said. Ethan's father, Alex. Kara continued after that. "You did indeed hear me correctly. I was with Alex when this woman who was pointing at me suddenly jumped in and took him away." The whispers began at once. It was obvious that people were attempting to determine whether or not what she was saying was accurate by talking to one another. I sensed that dozens of eyes were watching me, blazing with interest and criticism. Kara continued, making a dramatic gesture toward Ethan, who was standing next to her. "This young guy demonstrates my point. She came along and ruined the relationship that Alex and I were in. The fact that we were together didn't bother her. The fact that I was pregnant didn't bother me. She was just interested in him." Kara continued to develop her tale, obviously energized by the attention. "I didn't say anything for years," she added, seeming to feel anything. "I didn't want to destroy their bond. However, I am no longer able to do this. I can't continue to live a lie." "This is crazy," someone in the rear murmured at that moment. My mother seemed appalled, and I believe that some others were taking pleasure in the drama. She looked at Kara with shock, her face going pale. Clearly unclear of how to interpret the situation, Alex's co-workers who had come to support him were chatting frantically among themselves. Kara then took out her phone. She waved it in the air and added, "I have proof if you don't believe me." Alex sent me a text message. "Take a look at these." About the time he met her, he and I were conversing. She pretended to display texts on her phone as she went through it, but nobody could see anything clearly. "You see?" Holding up the screen, she said, "He told me that he wanted to be there for Ethan and that he cared for me, but she dragged him away and pointed right at me." Kara wasn't finished. She extracted a folded piece of paper from her purse. She held it up like a prize and said, "And if that's not enough." Alex is Ethan's father, according to this paternity test I have. Everyone in the room held their breath. My relative muttered something to his wife as he bent over. One of Alex's companions exclaimed, "What the hell is going on?" as some of the folks in the back began to mumble more loudly, loud enough to be heard by all. This is when Alex had moved forward. "Kara, that's sufficient." He attempted to take the microphone away from her, but she resisted and pulled away. "No, Alex." She glared at him as she spoke. "You can no longer hide from this. The truth should be known by everybody. And me?" I stood still. I was unable to speak, think, or even move. The floor seemed to have fallen out from beneath me, and I had no notion where I would land as I fell freely. At last, one of Alex's colleagues came forward. He tried to defuse the situation by saying, "Look, maybe this isn't the time or place," but Kara wouldn't have it that way. "No," she answered, raising her voice. "This is the precise moment and location. I'm tired of acting like everything is all right since I've been silent for far too long. Lying was the foundation of Alex and OP's love, and it's time for everyone to know the truth." By that time, murmurs and whispers filled the room. A few folks gave Alex suspicious looks. Other people looked at me as if they were anticipating my next comment. At last, my mother got up and attempted to speak with Kara, but Kara dismissed her, telling her not to pretend she was unaware. "You have equal responsibility for allowing this to occur." At some point, I woke up and urged Kara to go out. Naturally, she declined and continued her rant, accusing me of being self-centered and manipulative. I eventually had to escort her out by enlisting the help of the venue workers. The celebration had been destroyed by the time she left. People began to go, and I was too exhausted to keep them from doing so. Alex and I wrap up early that evening and thank the remaining guests for arriving. Kara's comments were all that was on my mind. Could she have been telling the truth? Did Alex have a secret from me? One thing seemed obvious, but I wasn't sure what to believe. My ideal engagement celebration had devolved into a complete catastrophe. Alex and I didn't immediately start talking when we arrived home. I didn't want to blow things out of proportion, so I wanted to collect myself before I confronted him. However, Alex, he was pacing the living room like he was preparing for a storm, clearly nervous. I broke the stillness at last. "What the devil was that, Alex? Is there any truth to what she said?" I inquired. He hesitated for a second. "You see, Kara is only attempting to create a commotion. You are aware of her personality." He spoke without making eye contact. For me, that was insufficient. "Avoid doing that. This isn't about her. I need you to tell me, have you ever had a relationship with Kara?" He was having trouble finding the right words. At last, he acknowledged it. "All right, I did. But that was a long time ago, far before we ever began dating. The date was brief, and I hardly recall it at all. You didn't think to tell me this when I asked him. You've spent time with her at family gatherings. You were aware of her identity, and you didn't believe I should be aware of it?" With defensiveness, he remarked, "I didn't think it mattered. It was pointless, and happened years ago. I didn't want to start a pointless argument between you two by bringing it up. It seemed unbelievable to me. That's not for you to decide, Alex. You believed I wouldn't ever find out about your liaison with my stepsister. You don't believe I should be informed about that? Prior to our engagement." He began to pace once again. "I never imagined it would be brought up. I haven't spoken to Kara in years. I promise, I was completely unaware that she was expecting a child and that she believed I was the father." It seemed as though the room was spinning. I wanted to trust him, on the one hand. He appeared truly perplexed and distressed, and I had never before had any cause to question him. However, how could I suddenly trust him that much? He had concealed this enormous secret from me, and now Kara was saying that their liaison had produced a kid. Questions were running through my head. Is Alex Ethan's biological father? Why, after all these years, would Kara bring this up now? What was I to do with this knowledge anyway? I couldn't stand to be close to him just then. "I need some space," I informed him. Alex stood by himself in the living area while I walked to the guest room. Alex tried to speak with me again the next morning, but I wasn't prepared. All I need is time. He gave me room, I informed him, but I could see the annoyance in his eyes. He wanted to get over this as soon as possible, but in my opinion, this couldn't be ignored. During the day, my thoughts turned to Matt, Kara's ex-husband. Everyone thought he was Ethan's father since he and Kara had been married around the time of Ethan's birth. However, there was a possibility that Kara was speaking the truth if Alex had slept with her before to Ethan's birth, or a portion of it anyhow. I made the decision to ask Matt whether he had any information. It was, to put it mildly, uncomfortable to approach Matt. After all that had transpired between him and Kara, we weren't close, and I wasn't even sure how he felt about me. However, I decided I had nothing to lose, so I looked up his number and called him. "It's Kara's stepsister, Matt. I know this is unexpected, but I need to discuss something important with you," I said. "Yes, you are in my memory. What's happening? Is everything all right?" I said. "Well, not exactly. It has to do with Ethan." Kara stated that my fiancé, Alex, is Ethan's father when she attended my engagement party last night. Among other things, she produced a paternity test. I could just feel Matt taking in what I had just spoken. "Hold on. According to her, Ethan's father is your fiancé." "Really?" "Yes," I said. In front of everyone, she created a great scene. I'm not sure what to trust anymore, even though Alex insists it's not real. "I thought you would be the best person to provide some clarification on this," Matt chuckled bitterly. Whoa, I am at a loss for words. To be honest, I've been unsure about becoming Ethan's father for a while. However, each time I brought it up to Kara, she would dismiss me, accuse me of being crazy, and claim that I was only seeking a way out of my obligations. I eventually gave up pushing since, well, what was the point? His remarks were like a ton of bricks to me. "You haven't performed a paternity test then?" I inquired. "No," he said. At the time, I believed it would just worsen the situation, but I probably should have. I reasoned that I would still have to deal with Kara even if he wasn't mine. To be honest, I didn't want to give her any more excuses to ruin my life. Now, however, I'm beginning to believe I made a mistake now. "Would you be open to getting a paternity test right now?" I inquired. I realize this is a lot to ask, but I believe it's the only way to understand the true situation. Matt made no hesitation. "What do you know?" "Yes, I've had enough of being in the dark. I want to know if Ethan isn't mine. And I will at least have some certainty if he is mine. I'll get things started by calling my attorney." The days that followed seemed to drag on forever. Matt set up the paternity test right away, which just increased my anxiety, even though I respected his haste. Each time my phone rang, I half expected it to be a Matt update, so I leaped. Meanwhile, Alex was having a difficult time at home. He expressed his displeasure that I had included Matt and made it apparent that he believed I was exaggerating. One evening, Alex said, "I don't understand why you're dragging Matt into this. He is not involved in this. Kara is only attempting to play tricks on us. Everything about this is related to Alex." I fired back. "There is a possibility that you are Ethan's father if Matt is not. You want to know the truth, don't you?" "It's not conceivable, as I've previously stated." His tone was defensive as he spoke. "Kara is lying. She lies all the time. So why do you fear the test findings so much?" I squinted as I asked. "This shouldn't be a problem if you're that certain." For that, Alex had no decent response. He simply said something and walked out of the room, leaving me to think on my own. After what seemed like an eternity, Matt finally received the findings. That day, he gave me a call. Anger and fatigue were mixed together in his voice. "Well, it's official," he said. "Ethan's father is not me." Although this was what I had been anticipating, I was nevertheless utterly taken aback. "I'm so sorry, Matt." Unsure of what else to say, I said. "Don't be," he answered. To be honest, I'm more relieved than anything else. However, I'm now dealing with a whole other issue. To begin the process of suing Kara for all the child support she has collected from me over the years, I have already given my lawyer a call. I will no longer serve as her scapegoat. Do you believe she was aware all along? My question was hardly audible above a whisper. She knew, of course, Matt said sourly. After years of playing this game, she's frantically trying to place the blame on others now that it's blowing up in her face. Apparently, just like you. My world seemed to be whirling even faster when we hung up. In the worst conceivable manner, everything Kara had done began to make sense. Her small web of falsehoods was coming undone after years of deceiving and controlling everyone. However, I felt ill rather than relieved, because there was a very real probability that Alex was Ethan's father if Matt wasn't. Alex's response didn't help when I informed him the results. Matt isn't the father, then. No big deal, he shrugged, as if the information wasn't so important. Alex, that has nothing to do with me. I yelled, it means everything. Who else may be the father if Matt isn't? You've already acknowledged having an affair with Kara. This allegation is no longer arbitrary. It's serious. He seemed irritated. I told you previously, Ethan's father is not me. Why you're allowing her to enter your thoughts in this way is beyond me. I refuse to let her influence my thoughts. I fired back. I'm attempting to discover the truth. Why do you oppose taking a paternity test so strongly? Prove it if you're so certain. He went too far at that point. Are you allowing Kara to control you? He began to shout. She's being as wild as you are. I felt like I was slapped in the face by that term. When someone intended to silence you, they would say something like that to make you feel like you were overreacting when you knew you weren't. After that, I was unable to even look at him. After leaving, I locked myself in the guest room where I had been staying since the engagement celebration. The next several days were a haze. I was unable to concentrate. Friends, work, and even simple household tasks. I couldn't stop thinking about what-if scenarios and questions. Alex and I, meanwhile, hardly talked. He always cut me off when I brought up the paternity test, telling me to believe him and to quit allowing Kara to destroy our relationship. However, he was refusing to do the one thing that could cleanse his record. So how could I trust him? Kara, too. She continued to stir the soup. She had begun phoning and messaging me constantly, alternating between insulting me and playing the victim. Then things became much more sinister. As promised, Matt sued Kara to recoup the year's worth of child support payments he had been making. He didn't stop there, though. His attorney began investigating Kara's financial and parental circumstances, and the results weren't encouraging. Kara had been lying about her salary, concealing debts, and spending the child support money on herself instead of Ethan. It was sufficient to enlist CPS. My mother told me about all of this when she contacted me one night in a panic. Ethan was taken by CPS, she said. According to them, Kara is not yet capable of taking care of him. It's complicated, but your stepdad and I are attempting to obtain interim custody. I was devastated to hear that. Ethan was a helpless youngster enmeshed in all of this mayhem. As much as I hated Kara, he wasn't worthy of being involved in his mother's deceit and bad choices. Is he all right? Trying to speak steadily, I asked. Despite his fear, he is now among us. According to my mother, we are making every effort to ensure his safety. Knowing that Ethan was with my mom and stepdad gave me a sense of peace, but the circumstances just made things feel worse. In addition to the fact that my relationship with Alex was in shambles, Kara's actions had completely upended the world for a young child. Alex eventually consented to take a paternity test following days of back-and-forth negotiations. He didn't do it voluntarily, though. He threw his hands up in exasperation and only gave in when I informed him that until he did, I couldn't forward with our relationship. I'll take the darn exam if it would make you happy. But this is a waste of time, I tell you. I felt insignificant the way he said it, as if my need for answers was irrational. However, I didn't let it deter me. Despite the fact that he obviously didn't want me there, we scheduled the appointment and I accompanied him to the clinic. Although everything went quickly, there was an intolerable amount of tension between us. He hardly gave me a glance at all. It was excruciating to wait for the findings. The uncertainty was killing me since I felt like my entire future depended on one piece of paper. I was unable to eat, sleep, or think of anything else. Alex, however, pretended that nothing was wrong. I became even more irritated with him as he continued with his day, as like nothing had occurred. When everything was coming apart, how could he have remained so composed? Kara, meantime, was disintegrating on her own. Her breaking point seems to be losing custody of Ethan. She began to snap at everyone. I'm Matt, even my mother. She left me a lengthy, meandering voicemail in which she claimed that I had destroyed her sole hope for happiness, taken her son away, and devastated her life. There were several paradoxes in it. She was pleading with me to assist her one moment, and then accusing me of being vengeful and self-centered the next. I didn't even try to answer. After days of stress, insults, and awkward silences, there was nothing I could say to get her to accept responsibility for her acts on the other side. Finally, Alex and I got into a heated argument. Like the previous disputes we'd been having recently, it began with me coolly attempting to justify the need for the paternity test. Alex didn't ignore me this time, though. He blew up. I told you previously. He slammed his fist against the kitchen counter and yelled, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going out of my way because Kara chose to make trouble during our engagement celebration. Why are you unable to trust me? Have faith in you? I lost my temper. You told me falsehoods about Kara. You knew she was in my life, but you didn't tell me you'd been with her. Additionally, a youngster is now involved. Alex, how am I to just believe what you say? He shook his head and laughed bitterly. It's not about me here. This has to do with you allowing Kara to control you. Since the beginning, she has been manipulating you, and now you are allowing her to ruin us. No, I responded. Alex, this has to do with your refusal to accept responsibility. You're willing to jeopardize our relationship because you're so afraid of what the test may reveal. You're certain that Ethan isn't yours. Why do you fear proving it so much? I'm not scared. He raised his fists in the air and yelled, simply said, I'm tired of you acting like the villain. You're acting as though I'm a liar who has been keeping things from you, even though all I've done is love you, because of the things you have been concealing. I fired back. I was not informed about Kara by you. You kept your liaison with, then a secret from me, and a few days later, Kara arrived to my mother's place. In a fit of hysteria, she screamed and banged on the door, demanding to see Ethan. As soon as it happened, my mother called, still trembling. She had a horrible appearance, as if she hadn't slept for days, my mother remarked. I informed her that she couldn't enter since she was the one destroying our relationship, not me. Kara is winning because of you. For me, it was it. I picked up my luggage and made my way to the door. I'm crying uncontrollably. Alex, you know what? Perhaps Kara isn't the issue. It may be you. Because you are currently demonstrating that your pride is more important to you than I am. As I opened the door, he softened his tone and added, Don't do this. You're going overboard. I informed him, I've had enough waiting for him to come forward. I can't stay here any longer if you refuse to take the test. I departed after saying that. I crashed at my buddy Sarah's house that evening. Sarah is a no-nonsense person. Friends, tell it like it is. When I visited her home, I was a total mess. After giving me a quick glance, she embraced me and let me to sob onto her shoulder. After I had calmed down, she added, Let me guess. I still don't think he'll take the test. He continues stating that I'm overreacting and that it's unwarranted. But the truth is all I seek. Is that asking for too much? Absolutely not. Sarah spoke strongly. He is afraid, which is why he is being protective. Furthermore, if you refuse to take this one little step to put your mind at ease, perhaps he is not who you believed him to be. I knew she was correct, even if her comments hurt. I made an effort to concentrate on myself throughout the course of the following few days, but Alex's calls and messages persisted. They initially expressed regret. I apologize for my handling of the situation. I'd rather not lose you. However, his tone changed to one of exasperation as the days passed. This is absurd. Sarah attempted to divert my attention, but nothing was able to stop me from thinking that Alex may be Ethan's father. I can't believe the results wouldn't be in for a few days. Meanwhile, Alex pretended that everything was okay. He periodically texted me, but his messages were brief and direct, as if he was still upset with me for pressuring him into this. I was just more furious as a result. Given how everything was going wrong, how could he have been so unconcerned? When the findings were eventually received, I thought I was going to puke up when we first met at our house. As I opened the letter with trembling hands, Alex was standing across the room with his arms folded and a frown on his face. "See," he said. "This was a waste, I told you," I interrupted him. As I read the paper, my voice broke. "Alex, you're his father." His face became white. "What? It's not. That isn't possible." He grabbed the paper out of my hands as he stumbled. In black and white, however, there it was. Unquestionable evidence. His head was in his hands as he slid into a chair. "I was unaware," he muttered. "I swear to God I was unaware." His remarks pierced my chest like a dagger. I wanted to trust him, to think that we could work this out together. However, I realized in my heart that we no longer had faith in one another. "Perhaps you were unaware of Ethan." With tears running down my cheeks, I spoke. "However, you were aware of Kara. You told me falsehoods about her. Additionally, a youngster is now involved. What should I do now that this is over?" Alex's eyes were full of desperation as he glanced up at me. "This is something we can resolve. Whatever it takes, I'll do it. Please don't abandon me." However, I was unable to. The trust had been lost, and I was certain that it would not return without more communication. After grabbing my luggage, I left Alex to confront the reality he had worked so hard to escape. Kara's circumstances continued to worsen in the wake of all of this. According to what I've heard, Matt's lawyer was unrelenting in his pursuit of his complaint. In addition to the child support he had paid throughout the years, Matt was pursuing damages for mental suffering as well. Kara had little chance of obtaining custody of Ethan anytime soon because her financial difficulties were becoming worse and CPS was still engaged. I wouldn't be telling the truth if I didn't get a little kick out of seeing Kara's lies come back to haunt her. She would accuse me of being the cause of all her problems for years, making me seem bad while portraying herself as the victim. However, she was now unable to avoid the repercussions of her behavior. And even though I felt bad for Ethan, I was unable to feel the same way about her. Days became weeks as time went on. After the engagement celebration, I began to accept that my life would never be the same again. Kara's charges, the test for paternity, I couldn't ignore these or simply forget about them. My connection with Alex, my family, and even myself had been completely transformed by them. In the months that followed, I found a modest place of my own and left the flat I had lived with Alex. I had it, even if it wasn't much. A new beginning. Sarah helped me keep focused on my objectives and provided as a continual source of encouragement, telling me that I deserved more. It changed everything for me when I started going to therapy. I felt as like I was finally absorbing all I had experienced, from the heartache of losing Alex to my tumultuous relationship with Kara for the first time in years. In hindsight, I saw that leaving Alex was much more than simply the mistrust and the falsehoods. It was about putting my happiness, my peace of mind, and myself ahead of a poisonous relationship. The goal was to escape the turmoil and drama that had dominated my life for so long. Since our last argument, I have not heard from Alex. Kara, however, was still up against a steep incline. Even her closest allies abandoned her since she had destroyed so many relationships. Although I didn't like her pain, I also didn't feel compelled to assist her. It felt fantastic to be putting myself first for once. I'm in a lot better place now, months later. I've resumed my dating life, but I'm going slowly this time. For the first time, I feel like I'm living for myself, rather than attempting to win over other people. Though they are still present, the wounds from all that transpired are becoming better. To everyone reading this who is experiencing a similar situation, this is all I have to say. Have faith in your instincts. Don't disregard things that don't seem right. And don't be scared to make your own decisions, even if it means separating from a loved one. The choices that result in the greatest progress are sometimes the most difficult. Thank you to everybody who read. I'm now beginning to glimpse the end of the tunnel after a long and agonizing trip. Years, but he was also advocating for mental anguish damages. Kara had little chance of obtaining custody of Ethan anytime soon because her financial difficulties were becoming worse and CPS was still engaged. I wouldn't be telling the truth if I didn't get a little kick out of seeing Kara's lies come back to haunt her. She would accuse me of being the cause of all her problems for years, making me seem bad while portraying herself as the victim. However, She was now unable to avoid the repercussions of her behavior. And even though I felt bad for Ethan, I was unable to feel the same way about her. Days became weeks as time went on. After the engagement celebration, I began to accept that my life would never be the same again. Kara's charges, the test for paternity. I couldn't ignore these or simply forget about them. My connection with Alex, my family, and even myself had been completely transformed by them. In the months that followed, I found a modest place of my own and left the flat I had lived with Alex. I had it, even if it wasn't much. A new beginning. Sarah helped me keep focused on my objectives and provided as a continual source of encouragement, telling me that I deserved more. It changed everything for me when I started going to therapy. I felt as like I was finally absorbing all I had experienced, from the heartache of losing Alex to my tumultuous relationship with Kara for the first time in years. In hindsight, I saw that leaving Alex was much more than simply the mistrust and the falsehoods. It was about putting my happiness, my peace of mind, and myself ahead of a poisonous relationship. The goal was to escape the turmoil and drama that had dominated my life for so long. Since our last argument, I have not heard from Alex. Kara, however, was still up against a steep incline. Even her closest allies abandoned her since she had destroyed so many relationships. Although I didn't like her pain, I also didn't feel compelled to assist her. It felt fantastic to be putting myself first for once. I'm in a lot better place now, months later. I've resumed my dating life, but I'm going slowly this time. For the first time, I feel like I'm living for myself, rather than attempting to win over other people. Though they are still present, the wounds from all that transpired are becoming better. To everyone reading this who is experiencing a similar situation, this is all I have to say. Have faith in your instincts. Don't disregard things that don't seem right. And don't be scared to make your own decisions, even if it means separating from a loved one. The choices that result in the greatest progress are sometimes the most difficult. Thank you to everybody who read. I'm now beginning to glimpse the end of the tunnel after a long and agonizing trip.